start. And as everyone is sitting down, we will start with a few words from Sherry Boras, the director of AVA Gallery. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's always such a pleasure to see this crowd come out. I mean, I don't know if you've been to a lot of different events at AVA, but there's always sort of a different crowd that comes out for each thing. You know, it's sort of interesting. So you are very special, and I know that some of you have heard me before, so tough luck. At any rate, I'm the executive director. AVA is celebrating its 50th year right now. The actual end of our 50th year will be the end of August. So we're trying to maximize this opportunity because it's such a sweet time, especially in a nonprofit's life. I mean, we're lucky in the surroundings. We have the Lebanon Opera House. It's celebrating 100 years in the next year. And the Upper Valley Music Center is going to be celebrating, I believe, 35 years. So we are counting our blessings. It's a tough world for nonprofits, and we're thankful that we've gotten to be this age, and it's all thanks to people like you. So I want to welcome you. I want to encourage you to not let this be a one-night stand, but to come and visit us all the time. We're open Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 5 p.m. And then we have all sorts of things going on otherwise, like things like tonight's event. We're going to have an artist talk on March 22nd. That's next week. And we're going to have a big fundraiser on April 27th. We're going to be having our annual auction. And so, sign up for our mailing list. Come and visit anytime. It's, anytime you're around, it's free and open to the public. So thank you for coming. And now, Judith.
Hi, thank you. Welcome to the Mudroom. And the way this is going to work, we're going to have 3 storytellers now. Then we are going to have an intermission, and we'll have another 3 storytellers. But right after intermission, we're inviting someone from the audience to tell a story. So start thinking. If you're inspired, you can submit story ideas out there. We have a little basket. And we're going to draw a name and be surprised. And I've been thinking this lately, being kind of down on the world. A world that's wars are happening, people are getting killed, and sometimes storytelling seems kind of futile to be here, sitting together, listening to stories while the world is up in flames and people are suffering. But I'm thinking also that exactly sharing personal stories is the one thing that can change the world. Because when we don't hear each other's stories, we can look at each other, we can see each other as strangers, as others, as enemies. But when you hear someone's story, you are forced to imagine what you would have done in their situation, and you have to see people as humans, as others. Stories humanize us. And I think it's one of the few things that bring change in the world. Because if we don't humanize each other, we can look at each other as enemies, as strangers. We are in a society where people are very divided and think others cannot be trusted, are enemies. But stories can bring us together and are the opposite of this extremist worldview where you can see other people as enemies or others. So that's why I think storytelling is so essential. Thank you. And I want people to tell more stories. Not only here, but also tell each other stories. One thing I used to do, or still do sometimes, I just invite people over to my house and tell them to bring friends and neighbors and pick up strangers from the street and just sit in a circle and tell stories. Everyone 5 minutes and tells a story from their life. And we actually took this into the community, and we started organizing Story Jam in White River Junction at Jam. Yeah. So everybody in the community is invited to come. We sit in a circle, and people can just, yes, come. I'm expecting you to be there. Next week, Thursday, a week from today, we're gonna have Story Jam. Everybody is invited. The idea is you can just walk in, we sit in a circle, everybody gets 5 minutes to tell a story, and our theme for next Thursday is Crossed Wires. Stories about confusion, misunderstanding. But you can interpret that theme however you want. And if you have a story, if you're moved to tell a story that doesn't exactly fit the theme, that's also fine. We just want stories. So please come next Thursday at Jam, which is in White River Junction next to the Tucker Box. When you go in, instead of going to the right into Tucker Box, you walk straight, and that's when you reach Jam. I would love it if we see some more people there.
What time?
A time, 6 till 7:30. Actually, Sharon, one of our storytellers today, I met because she was the only person who showed up last time we had Story Jam. But she had such an amazing story, I told her she had to come here. But the other thing about Story Circle is that it's no pressure. It's not an audience like here. You're just sitting in a circle. And I put out some flyers. So if you're interested, look at the flyers that are out there on the table. And again, if you have a story that you can share today after intermission, that you can just improvise, put down an idea. I'm going to plug that again later. And there was one other thing. No, that's all I wanted to announce so far. So I think we can start with storytelling. And our first storyteller is Michelle Rogi, and who is actually my co-conspirator with Story Jam. We together, and like me, Michelle is very interested in forming community. So she also has a podcast about community for Jam. And she's always interested in interviewing people from the community to talk about what makes community. And I'm sure you should, she would love it if people, if you volunteer to be interviewed for the podcast. Okay, Michelle.
Thank you, Judith. Hello, everyone. Nice to see all these smiling faces. On the first day of 7th grade, I made a momentous decision. One that would influence the course of the next 4 decades of my life, leading me to marry and found a family in a country thousands of miles from where I sat that day in the fluorescent lit multi-purpose room of Wells Middle School in Dublin, California, with Mr. Hal standing at a podium much like this, wagging his finger at incoming 7th graders. You must choose wisely. Your foreign language should be Spanish. It is the only practical choice, the only good one. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would learn French. And so I did. I grappled with gender, and I dabbled in the subjunctive, and I dodged the faux amis, and I learned to nuance the imparfait from the passé composé. And by the time I got to my 17 years of almost adulthood, I was ready for the world, but not quite ready for university level French. But I persisted, and on I went. And at the age of 19, I decided that I would go to a study abroad program in Paris. And it was located in the center of this beautiful city, in the 6th arrondissement, at the American Center for Critical Studies, a stone's throw away from the Luxembourg Gardens. And I remember the day I left, sort of looking back at my parents. This was all before, way before 9/11. Parents could actually come to the gate with you at the time. This was before internet, this was before cell phones. And as I looked at my parents sort of getting smaller as I walked away, I realized just how totally independent and exciting this was, but also just how alone I was going to be. And so I landed in France, and I proceeded to, with my rudimentary language skills, to look for an apartment. And much trial and error, I finally found a studio in the 2nd arrondissement, a beautiful little street called Rue de la Lune, which was very poetic. And I decided to rent this apartment with 2 of my schoolmates, and it was a studio. So there was one, what we called a clic-clac, which is a little sofa, fold-out bed, and that we shared. So one would sleep on the bed and the others on the floor, and then we would rotate the next night. And we had what I would call less than half bath, with what the French call a sabot, for a bathtub, which is somewhere between a shower stall and a bathtub, with a spray nozzle that sort of sprays all over the room, whatever. I learned how to make Turkish coffee, and I made friends with the man, Hervé, who made crepes at the street corner bistro, and it was a very exciting time. And we edged into fall, and my American Center for Critical Studies decided to throw a very culturally maladapted party for Halloween. At the time, there was no such thing as Halloween celebrations in France. But there we were, my roommates and I, all 3 of us in that tiny bathroom, getting ready for the party, smearing our faces with white and green makeup, all dressed in black. We put dark circles around our eyes. We were zombies. And we jumped on the metro, and those steely-faced Parisians did not bat an eye. And so we went to the party and walked into the room, and lo and behold, this beautiful man was sitting there with the band playing the saxophone. And I thought to myself, interesting, intéressant. And I decided, you know what? What the heck? What have I got to lose? He was pale, chiseled cheekbones, sort of reminiscent of a very young David Bowie, almond-shaped eyes, greenish brown, and I was smitten. And so I screwed up my courage, and I asked him for his phone number in my halting and very awkward French. He had this sort of sneer that, well, really it only works when you're French. But he gave me his phone number, and there it said on the paper, Laurent. And so my heart was very full. And I went home, and that whole weekend, I stared at my phone in my apartment. It was sort of challenging me. Can you do it? Can you really, really do it? You think you can do it? And I did it. I called sort of with a little prayer, like, please, please, please don't let it be anyone but him who answers the phone, because I don't want to leave a message. I won't know how to do that. And luckily, he answered. And so began a great romance. He brought me into his world of the 6th floor, no elevator, maid's quarters that he inhabited near Pigalle in a very impressive Napoleonic apartment building. And we smoked, and we drank, and we drank, and we smoked, and we listened to Serge Gainsbourg albums on repeat until I could sing Les Petits Trous. If you know what it is, you know what I'm talking about, without a hint of an accent. And I achieved this level of fluency that I had only ever dreamed of back in my bedroom in Dublin, California. But of course, months of romance and poetry and jazz led to me realizing I still needed to go back and finish my undergraduate degree in California. And so, despite my heady state, I made the very pragmatic decision to go back. And yet, my only intention in going back was finish those studies as fast as I could so that I could get back to Paris and back to Laurent. And so I did. I made my plans, and we would, correspond as feverishly as you can via snail mail, because once again, no cell phones. And our, obviously, long distance phone calls were extremely expensive at the time, so rare. But we maintained our relationship as I finished out my studies. And I decided to spend the last of my savings on a one-way ticket, non-refundable, back to Paris. And the day I went to buy my ticket, I called just to make sure everything was okay. And so we were speaking on the phone, and I sensed something was a little off. So I said, if you have any misgivings, tell me now. Now is the time. Say it, because tomorrow it's going to be too late. And he hesitated, but he reassured me. And so I did it. I bought the ticket. And that night, he called me back to say, I met someone else. I was devastated. I was angry. And at that point, I made another promise to myself. I am not gonna let this son of a bitch ruin my future. I'm going back to France, and I'm gonna make something of my life. Yes. And then I thought about how that might happen. And thankfully, my mother was somewhat of an angel. And she said, don't forget you have an aunt who lives in France. Why don't you give her a call? So I did. My Aunt Prudence, very aptly named, the second eldest child of 4 from a very Irish Catholic family in Pennsylvania, had decided to make her life in the largest nudist colony in Europe, located in the south of France. And so, another fateful phone call later, this time in English. It was a little bit easier. I had a place to go and a step to the future. And so, I embarked on what became many life lessons, much learning, much trial and error once again, a lot of night clubbing and really bad hangovers, but all of it helped me heal my heartache and took me down a path that influenced really the next many, many decades of my life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next storyteller is going to be Chris Jackson, who grew up locally here in Hanover, Norwich, and is a carpenter and builder. He had a brief stint as a hippie going to San Francisco in the 1960s, 70s. I forgot something. I was going to introduce everyone by asking them a promise they had made to themselves. And because I was thinking, one promise, as an example, a promise that I made to myself was that I promised to myself that whenever I notice someone, I notice something in a person that I appreciate, I have to stop them. I have to tell them and compliment them on it. And it can be really awkward. Like, for example, when I walk in the street and I see a handsome guy with really beautiful eyes, I have to stop him and say, "You have really beautiful eyes." It can get really awkward, usually. But the thing is, I asked Chris, and he said his story is already gonna be about something that he promised himself. But the one thing he promised himself was that he would show up tonight. And I'm so glad he did. Thank you, Chris.
Well, let's see how this goes. So I graduated from Hanover High School in 1964 as a young, bright, young man, whatever you call it, 18-year-old. I mean, with a lot of promise, I was bright. I was going to go to an elite school on the East Coast, and I was headed for a career in maybe government or law. I felt I could do something to improve the world. That the world looked like something that could be improved because I was a social activist and I was into civil rights and I was burgeoning against the war and I was believing the world could be made better and maybe I'd have a part in it. Well, 4 years later was 1968. I graduated from college and things were different. The world many of you might remember, was in a certain kind of upheaval then. 1968, remember, was when Martin Luther King was killed, Bobby Kennedy was killed, the war in Vietnam was reaching a peak, the cities were burning with race riots. I mean, my prospects from high school suddenly weren't, I was disillusioned and depressed and discouraged. And I was angry, and I didn't know quite what to do with that. I was not going to go into the system. You remember the system? So what did I do? I went to San Francisco. This is September of 1969. I spent 2.5 years there. Great years, I want to tell you. You can use your imagination about how great that was, because I don't have time to tell you. But it really was great. But the story is not about that, or the details. I'd love to tell you about that. But the story is about a very personal event that happened. I was going to start out this with a kind of a zinger line, and I'll do it now. She was 18, and I was 24. And she had promised me that she wasn't going to get pregnant. But she did. Which is quite an event for me then, and it suddenly focused my attention. Oh, I gotta stick to the microphone? It focused my attention. I had been with this young lady only for a few months. She had come in, I had landed in San Francisco on the floor of my cousin Jane, and Tina had come and landed on the floor of her sister, Margot in the same apartment building. Okay, they were friends. We got to know each other. There's a great California story about how my cousin Jane and I, Tina was her name. She was 18 years old and she got involved, get this, I can't tell all these stories. She got involved with a cult. We're talking about Snake, the black dude who gathered young women and talked about the world according to the book of Revelations, up in a campground in the National Forest above Big Sur. Well, my cousin Jane and I figured that wasn't a great thing and that we needed to rescue her, which we did. I can tell you that story too, but that's not the point. We came back and a couple months later, Chris and Tina were cohabiting as we were in those days. And that was when she promised me that she wasn't going to get pregnant, but she did. Okay. Well, I was faced with my first big adult decision. And that was, I knew that I wasn't in love with this woman. And I knew that I was not prepared to be a father or a husband. I was not ready for that. So what do I do? What do I do to be true to myself and to be good in this situation? Well, here's the rest of the story. So I didn't think it was going to work out, but I did say, let's live together and see how this might work out. And we did for 1.5 years. And it wasn't going to work out, but I had a real problem, because I fell deeply in love with this child. My son Jonah was, I'd like to show you the picture I have. It's a black background, the sun shining on him in his high chair. He has a huge smile. He might be openly laughing. But that is the child that I just fell in love with. What are you going to do? And so what am I going to do, right? Well, what I did was we made our decision to both come back east and recover from California. She back to her home in Connecticut, and me back to the Upper Valley, and ground ourselves in a more adult life. You'll like this. We drove back across the country in the Volkswagen bus with the feathers hanging from the mirror and a mattress in the back where the kid could sleep. They could do that in those days. And we did that, and we went to our different homes. And the point is that I had figured out that the best thing I could do and the only thing I could do was make a big promise. A big promise to Tina, and a big promise to Jonah, my son, and a big promise to myself. But I would be, such as it could be that we were still going in separate ways, that I would be in this child's life. I would be as much of a father as I could. And I don't have time, do I, to tell you all the stories about that. But Jonah is now 53 years old. He has 2 teenage grandchildren of mine in Austin, Texas, where he's been all this time, so we can't be that close, but he's doing well. We are committed as father and son. We love each other. We know each other. Tina lives in Oregon. I see her once a year when she comes to Connecticut to visit her 101-year-old mother from Ukraine. Okay, that's another one. But the point is, it all worked out. And it worked out because I made a promise. Because I had to make a promise, and I did make a promise to be this kid's father, and I did. I can't tell you how much of I didn't do a perfectly great job of it, but I did stick with it, and I made sure that we were going to be father and son in some best fashion. And it worked out well, and we are father and son now. And I don't think I have any more time, but that's the bones of the story. Oh, I got to tell you one little piece of it. Okay. So remember I was angry and discouraged and upset, and I dallied at the time with radical, really serious radical. I mean, we're talking about maybe the weathermen, right? I was pretty angry about the way things were going. But as I got to San Francisco, I changed my focus, because I figured out that there was something wrong with being violent in search of peace and love in the world. It didn't sound quite right, and so I did change that, and I went to a good other place. But that gives me a chance to tell you a funny bumper sticker that kind of sums up that feeling that my friend Maureen had years ago. Stomp out violence. So whenever you think about that, you can think about that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Stomp out violence. Let's not do that. Our next storyteller is Tara Friend-Cantori from Lebanon. And Tara is a local writer and artist and has worked for many years as a physical therapist and is new to storytelling. And when I asked her a promise she had made to herself recently, she said that was to exercise vulnerability. Tara, welcome.
If this isn't an exercise in vulnerability, I don't know what is. It was 1987, and we were home from college for the summer. Vinny had yet to convince his parents that it was okay for me to sleep in the house. They, being devout Catholics, said, "Not under our roof." But somehow, the backyard was fair game. So we pitched a tent. We took our 2 sleeping bags, rolled them out, unzipped them, and fashioned one larger sleeping bag on top of a big egg-crate cushion. And he brought his trusty flashlight, and I brought my boombox with a small collection of cassette tapes, ZZ Top, Tube Snake Boogie, right? Def Leppard, right? Pour Some Sugar on Me, Scorpions, Rock You Like a Hurricane. You get the idea. So we fashioned it, and yeah, so Vinny and I, we had met when we were, so a year and a half prior, 1985, in college, at a bar called Minerva's. I know I don't look like I met my husband in a bar, but during the middle of the week, during midterms, I was downtown on a Thursday night and met him at Minerva's. We joke about which version of the story we're going to tell our grandchildren about how we met, and it probably won't be the one where there's an excess of Long Island iced teas, sticky floors, and some sort of mix of Madonna's Get Into the Groove and Beastie Boys' Fight for Your Right to Party. Yeah. But the way it started was, "Hey, Tara. Hey, Vinny. Oh, you remember my name?" And so the courtship began. It was a weekend affair for a period of time. And then it got a little bit more serious, and we were probably dating for about 6 months, and we decided that Vinny would come visit for the weekend in his cute little blue VW Golf, and we'd go for a drive, and we decided to take the ferry across Lake Champlain and go from Burlington to Plattsburgh. Seemed like a fun thing to do. So we did, and then when we got to Plattsburgh, we drove around, and then, we pulled off the side of the road to educate ourselves and read the placard all about Samuel D. Champlain. Who are we kidding? We pulled over to make out, but anyway. So we're sitting there and we're looking across the lake from New York to Burlington, a different perspective. And somehow the conversation turned kind of serious and talking about our future. And mind you, we hadn't talked about marriage or anything like that, but somehow I blurted out, I just don't want us to end up divorced like my parents. And he said, we won't, I promise. And I said, well, how do you know? And he said, because we're not your parents. And I thought, I knew right then, that is he is the wisest 20-year-old man I ever knew, and that he was my soulmate. And it's true, and the rest, they say, is history, but back to the tent. Right? So we're at his parents' split-level house, and we fashioned the tent. It's time to go in and get ready for the big Italian dinner. And I'm prepared by now. That's another story. First dinner. So I went in the bathroom to get ready, and I was sitting on the toilet, and I heard a knock at the door, and I said, who is it? And he said, it's me. I said, oh, hey, me. And he said, are you decent? And without hesitation, I said, yep. And he came in, and I was still sitting on the toilet. And he's like, started to backpedal, fumbled a little bit. Well, you said you were decent. I said, well, it's not like I'm naked or anything. It's not like anything you haven't seen before. I'm thinking, what's the big whoop here? And then he closed the door behind him, fully committed now, took one big step, went down on one knee, and said, will you marry me? And I said, yes, I will marry you. Should I get up now? Make myself decent? He said, blushed a little bit, and he said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So we stayed in the bathroom, the privacy of the bathroom. I washed my hands to get ready for the ring. And he put this gorgeous ring on me, this gorgeous ring. And he explained as he put it on that it was an old mine-cut diamond that his great-grandmother had, and that she had smaller fingers, so he had it, sized just for me. And I said, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. And he said, I really wanted to propose in the tent. I thought it would be really romantic. I kind of blew it. I was really nervous. And, we laughed, we cried, we kissed, of course. And everything faded away. Even the brown fuzzy bath mat standing on, the mango bathtub, and the thousands of teeny tiny goldfish on the wallpaper. So we decided to finally leave and share our good news with his parents. And of course, they were thrilled, but they said, you still can't sleep in the house, Tara. So for all these years, Vinny's been embarrassed to tell the story of how he proposed. But I think it is by far the most intimate proposal that I've ever heard. And when about a month ago, I told Vinny I was going to tell the story tonight, and he said, do I have to come? And so he did. And thank you for coming, Vinny. And thank you. And thank you for the promise.
A romantic story. It's better than my friend who organized the whole wedding and then forgot to tell her boyfriend, and when she told him, he said, no way, I'm not gonna get married, and she had to tell everyone it was canceled. But they stay together anyway. They're still not married, but they have 3 kids. Intermission time. I hope some of you are by now inspired with a story you can share. And of course, remember, we know if you're sharing your story as an audience member, you know you haven't had time to rehearse or prepare. So we will appreciate any story you can share. Like it's going to be like 5 minutes or so to tell a story. So yeah, intermission. There is, and after intermission, we'll do a raffle. So if you haven't, make sure you have a raffle ticket. Forget how that works. Can they still get that if they don't have one? Okay, yes, yeah. So make sure you have a raffle ticket. Put it in, put your raffle ticket in the, whatever is out there. 1 box for raffle tickets and 1 box for story. 1 basket for people who are going to volunteer to tell a story, and then we'll draw a name after intermission. Thank you. So did everyone put in their raffle ticket here? Okay, in that case, and I also just wanted to mention one more time that we had these flyers out there for next week for Story Circle, Story Jam. You can just take one. They were on the table there. Do we still have wine out there that we want people to take? It's gone? Oh, no, good, it's gone, okay. So, in that case, let's start with the raffle. Oh, no, let's start with drawing a name from the people who, we got 4 story submissions. Woo! So, Helen, do you want to draw a name here? Okay. And we got Kate, start with a D.
Dembinski.
Yes. Kate, are you still willing to come up here? but wait. Don't come yet, because we still have to do the raffle. So you have like 1 minute to put it together, the story. And, okay, the raffle. So we're gonna have, oh my God, I forget always what a free ticket or 2 tickets, right? 2 tickets. 2 times 2 tickets? And
No. 1 membership. 2 tickets and a membership.
And 1 membership, okay. So the first one is just gonna be 2 tickets
To the mudroom.
for the Mudroom.
Not tonight.
Yeah, for any time you wanna come. And the person who won that is?
Susan Matson.
Susan Matson. Okay, so Helen, you are gonna take down Susan's name.
She's got her number on here.
So we have, you actually don't even have to come up here. Just make sure you get those tickets. So we have Cheryl get in touch with you. And then we have the other prize, which is a membership to AVA Gallery.
Exciting.
And that is?
Glasses. Oops. Rainy.
Rainy? Rainy. So you don't have to come up here. Do we have all the...
Give me a contact information.
Okay, you need to give contact information. Do you want to run up there and get it? And meanwhile, we're going to have... Kate, do you want to start coming up? Like, we can come around. And so, do you think your story will be like under 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay. Because I realized we had to make that warning because we've had people come up here and like tell a story of like 40 minutes.
I don't know if it's as coherent a story as everyone else's, but it's
We
loose
know
association.
you're really improvising, so
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
already impressed.
Yes. So thank you. Thank you for gathering here today to listen to me talk about one of my favorite things, my friendship. The interesting thing about friendship is that there's not really a way to codify it like marriage. There's no like friendship contracts, unlike in, I think it was Calvin and Hobbes suggested it. But there's no way to be like, these are my people and we will be friends for a set number of years. But somehow my friend Catherine kind of found a way to make a friendship contract. That was really fun for everyone involved. So picture this, end of freshman year at college, my friends Emily and Megan are like, oh, we got the worst luck in the housing lottery. We're stuck at the top of this tall tower with these four random people, two loud boys. Loud boys are great, but my friends are like quiet girls. So they were very worried about this. But then as it turned out, the loud boys were great, and the two other people were also great. And I, being the type of person that I am, I like to hang around people for a long time until I get to know them. So I became friends with them as well. At the end of the year, one of my friends, Shire, had kind of a tough personal thing that happened in their life, and everyone kind of rallied around them to support them. And then four of us were going on study abroad trips. And so Catherine, being the wonderful person that she is like, no, this group is too important to us. We have to stick together somehow. So we are going to make a YouTube channel, and we're going to assign each person one day of the week, and you're going to make a video each week, and you're going to post it on that day as a way to like keep in touch. And this is a lovely idea, slightly unsustainable, because even when you're just like talking about your favorite books, it's a little hard. But this was like thrilling to me, because finally I was part of this like designated friend group. I was part of this group of people that are like, we are friends, we are gonna be friends, we are gonna do things together, and we are gonna like share this with the world. And so it kind of petered off like as we got back into the school year, but we still made videos. And then I had to exit my study abroad program early, unfortunately, and people kept making videos, and I was like, am I not part of this friendship anymore? Is this the end of it? Have I like broken this friendship promise? But as it turns out, the real friendship was not the YouTube channel, it was the people. And the YouTube channel is no longer up because Catherine is a therapist now, and she can't have that kind of thing online. But that kind of spirit of collaboration just really meant the world to me. And yeah, that's my story.
Thank you so much. And I see there are 3 more storytellers in here. I really hope that you will submit the same stories or other stories for our next Mudroom, because we are always looking for storytellers. Our next Mudroom is gonna be June 13th. And the theme is going to be mixed messages. And of course, you can interpret a theme pretty loosely, but maybe if the story you submitted here matches that theme, even loosely, please submit it again, because we are really always looking for storytellers. And we want to see new storytellers, new faces. And especially if you've not if this is your first time as a storyteller, we really like that. You don't have to be a practiced, professional, experienced storyteller. It's fine if you are stumbling a bit. I mean, This is a friendly audience. We love first-time storytellers. So please, submit your stories. Again, June 13th, mixed messages is the theme. It's on the program. Okay, and now it's time for our next storyteller, Sharon Blake, who has worked as a nurse much of her life, but in retirement, she has written a memoir. I wish we had put the title of the memoir here so people could have found that. Maybe you can say that later. And she also has a note card. She's making note cards, a line of note cards called Chickenisms. And when I asked her a promise she had made to herself recently, that would actually be to practice public speaking and storytelling. So give it up for Sharon.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Good evening. You're probably wondering about this guy. He came with me tonight. It's not real. But you'll see more about him later. So my story starts many years ago when I was a 5-year-old living in upstate New York. We lived, 7 of us, in a kind of a very modest, ramshackle house, a farm with 80 beautiful pastoral acres and a pond. And the house was, really basic. No indoor plumbing. But number 7, my father, he passed away about a year before this story. He was a man who liked his beer, and he loved his whiskey to death. So he was gone, and he left his wife and family destitute and penniless. So there was my mom and the 5 of us, and I was the youngest at that point. And Mom was frantic most of the time about how was she going to raise these 5 kids, and how was she going to feed them? They seemed to always be hungry. She had a little magic outside. Her magic was blended well with the outdoors. She worked really well with all the animals that we had. We had a menagerie of animals. But when she got inside, her magic didn't work too well for summoning up dinner, per se. And I, being a 5-year-old youngin', I felt it was my job to help her out. I don't know why I thought it was my job, but I did. And so I was always coming up with some get-rich-quick scheme. And one day, my brother pulled me aside, and he said, I've got a great idea for you. You can make so much money that you can go down to the neighborhood grocery and totally clear off the shelves, bring all that food, plus the candy bars and the cookies, bring them all home, stock up our shelves. I was all ears. Let's go. So I said, well, what do we need to do? And he said, well, I'll give you a list of things you need to gather, but I'm going to teach you how to make beer. And here's your list. This, and this. And I took my list and I grabbed my little wagon. I went all around the farm yard. And I found a big heavy plank about this size. And then I went on to my dirt pile and I picked up my little pail. And then I went on to the house. And he had told me to kind of keep it quiet because Big Sister and Mom might not approve of little Sharon making beer. So you had to really kind of sneak around the house. So I got to the house and I snuck around and I got some mason jars, put tops on them. And then the most important thing he told me to get was a big stone. A stone that I could carry in my fist like this, kind of smooth on the side. The size of it and the makeup of it was pretty important. And he said, and now when you get all that together, go down by the pond, and that's where you'll set up your brewery. So it was the time of year, early summer, where that pond was chock full of pollywogs, tadpoles. And you know what they are, right? Yeah? But did you know pollywogs make a great tasting beer? It's true, my brother told me so. So I got down to the pond and I put all the things out, put the plank right there by the pond and everything else right close by. I was just doing everything that I was told to do. Didn't question it at all. And I took my shoes and socks off, stepped into the pond with my pail in hand. I felt the mud oozing up between my toes. But I was on a mission. And I took my pail and very quickly pulled in at least 3 pailful of pollywogs. I poured them out on my wooden work surface, picked up my stone, and then I went about mashing them. And they were wiggling all over the place and trying to get back into the water. They didn't know what was happening to their world. And I didn't really like what I was doing because, I mean, they were part of my circle of friends. And I really didn't enjoy doing this. But, you know, I was on a farm and I knew that when you live on a farm, sometimes your critters become dinner. So I got many of them mushed, pulverized, and then I scraped them into canning jars. And I looked at it, and I looked at it up into the sunlight, and something didn't really look right. And I sniffed it, and I peered down into it. It looked like pearlescent carnage. And I thought, well, this doesn't look, and it doesn't smell like anything that my father used to love to drink. But I'm going to continue on and see what I can do. I think I'm going to ask my brother if maybe I missed a step, what I'm supposed to do with this mess. So I turn around to ask him a question, and here he is over there, doubled over in laughter. He really got me. And I knew at that moment I had been tricked by my brother's wicked sense of humor. And ever since then, for 70 years, I have been unable to look a frog in the eye without pangs of guilt. And even now, when I walk along a pond or anything like a stream where there might be some frogs, I know that there's a whole row of them. There's some of them back there. And there's a whole row of frogs peering at me with an accusing look. And I thought to myself, well, those frogs sure have long memories. They have memories like elephants, intergenerational memories. And they said to me, you think that we have forgotten what you did to our babies? No, we haven't. And part of the education program for all new pollywogs, you must always beware of a little girl with a pail. So much, Sharon, and I love that frog. And did you say you made it today? I did, today. Can I hold it up one more time? I spent all my time when I should have been getting ready to come here. Look at this. It's beautiful. Thank you. Well, our next storyteller is Gus Guzowski. Our next storyteller is Pat McDevitt, who is another local person, grew up in the Upper Valley and raised 3 children here, spent a few years in Europe, in Belgium, working there. When I asked Pat what promise he has made to himself recently, he said, that during the pandemic, he vowed that he was going to learn to cook. And he did it. And now he makes a really good steak in a skillet, in an cast iron skillet. Pat, please tell your story. Thank you.
When I was 12, Christmas took an unexpected turn because I realized that morning that I had probably reached the age where I was going to begin receiving gifts that I needed more than gifts I wanted. And this was evidenced by a 6-pack of tube socks, a blanket with ducks printed on it, and a small brown hardcover book with blank pages inside. And I held the book and I looked at my mother with the eyes of a boy who was looking for anything Star Wars related. And she said to me, Gus, why, it's a journal for journaling. And I thought, what? Why is this something that I would want? Now, I do need to explain that my mother was a prolific journaler herself. She filled notebooks. And I think she wanted to pass on the journaling gene. She would occasionally show me something that she had written. Her writing was profoundly introspective and personal and spiritual, so it was profoundly baffling. And she would show me something and I would go, interesting. And she said, her last words of encouragement to me were a promise. She said, I promise you'll always be thankful for writing down your most important thoughts. The problem, of course, was that I had none. And I knew this. So I took my blank journal and I put it on the bookshelf in my room next to the Bible. And by Bible, I mean the Boy Scout Handbook. The Boy Scout Handbook contained all the wisdom that a 12-year-old boy would need to survive the end of times. How to send a message with your flashlight in Morse code? Check. How to use diluted lemon juice as invisible ink? Check. How to waterproof your wooden matches by dipping them in wax? Check. It was everything you needed, but there were some omissions. It did not explain, for example, how to pick a lock. It did not explain how to cook a squirrel. And I started to wonder, perhaps my journal could be a compendium of the things that the editors of the Boy Scout Handbook had let fall to the cutting room floor. Perhaps I could collect things that I knew that would be of use in the future, perhaps as an appendix to the Boy Scout Handbook. What I lacked as a 12-year-old boy in original thoughts, I more than made up for in arrogance. My father and mother at the time drank coffee and tea respectively, and making my father's coffee meant 2 heaping teaspoons of Taster's Choice instant freeze-dried coffee into a mug, fill it with water, 2 minutes in the microwave. My mother's tea was 1 Salada tea bag. Put it in the mug, fill it with water, remember to remove the tag because it has a metal staple, then put it in the microwave for 2 minutes. And during those 2 minutes, you could reflect on what was written on the Salada tea bag. What the editors of Salada tea bag tags had decided would be that day's gem. Things like, opportunity often comes disguised as hard work. I copied that into my journal. I copied a lot of Salada tea bag tags into my journal, and when I was too busy, and as a 12-year-old boy I was often too busy, I would just stick the tag into the spine of the journal. Salada tea bag tags and I had a really good run until my mother's morning beverage of choice changed to Mountain Dew. Oddly, the preparation was kind of the same. Put it into a mug and in the microwave for 2 minutes. And I never wondered, like, how does this affect your journaling? A big basket of Reader's Digest back issues sat in our hall, and I discovered that those were also a useful source of important thoughts. Things like, better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. No one had ever said this to me before. And I knew that future generations of Boy Scouts needed to know this. My father was also an occasional source of important thoughts for my journal. Earlier that year, the price of oil had apparently gone too high, and he decided that his patriotic duty was to begin heating our home by burning wood instead of oil. So he bought 2 wood stoves, and he very proudly told us one summer morning, bought a cherry picker load of wood, it'll be delivered on Friday. And I knew even then that he had no idea what was going to be delivered. And when he saw this immense pile of logs, he went out and he bought a chainsaw for himself and an 8-pound wood maul for me and my brother. And he would cut the logs into 16-inch lengths, and then we would try to hand split the wet green wood. And we would do this for about an hour or so, and then we'd take a break and we'd sit down, and he would chuckle and he'd say, "Wood warms you twice, boys. Wood warms you twice." And I reluctantly copied that into my journal. So I got onto a pretty good cadence. I mean, this promise of you'll always be thankful for writing down your most important thoughts had started out as kind of a challenge, but I was realizing it was becoming a vocation. And about 6 weeks later, it was February break, and that February break was really cold and really sharp, but not that snowy, which meant it was good for pond hockey. There was a pond about a quarter of a mile from our house. You had to go through the woods. It was at the edge of a farmer's field. And there were 2 cement structures next to the pond that had been built as bathhouses from many years ago when the pond had been used as a day camp. The location of the pond and the bathhouses created 2 logistics problems. One, I don't believe an adult ever checked the thickness of the ice. My mother would say, "Is the ice safe?" And I'd say, "Yes." And that confidence was based on the fact that we had skated on it all afternoon. The second problem was where and how to put on your skates. Most of my friends opted for the obvious: carry your skates, get down to one of the cement bathhouses, go in, sit down, take off your boots, take off your gloves, and with increasingly frozen fingers, lace up your skates, because this was before there was Velcro. I opted for the comfort of my own home, putting on the skates, and then walking through the woods on my skates. But this year we had a secret plan, because a few months earlier, when we weren't being unnaturally warmed twice by wood, my friends and I, our group of 8 boys, had discovered one of the farmer's old trash dumps. The things that had survived were made of glass or metal. So we found old bottles, oil cans, springs, tractor parts, and to our delight, an upright, rusty, pot-bellied wood stove. We now went back for the stove. We rolled that stove through the snow and got it to one of the bathhouses and stood it up in the back corner. My friend Ronnie, he was the smartest in the group. His father was a German engineer, and he had his sensibilities. And he looked at us and he looked at the wood stove and he said, "We need to build a chimney." We agreed. We all went back to our homes and gathered the things that might be needed to build a chimney. My brother and I found a length of PVC piping and a section of flexible plastic dryer vent. When we had all returned to the bathhouse, Ronnie and his brother were the last 2 to come in. And Ronnie had a huge smile on his face. In one hand, he held a caulking gun, and in the other hand, a half-used tube of tub and tile caulk. We laid out the pieces for the chimney, and he worked on it, caulking. Because it was so cold, the caulk set very quickly. And we attached it to the back of the wood stove, angled it out through a small hole in the roof. I don't remember who thought to bring matches, but I know it wasn't me, because they hadn't been dipped in wax. We went out and broke branches, brought them back, made kindling, sorted them by size, exactly as described in the Boy Scout handbook, and started a fire. And as our faces and our hands were warmed, we just marveled at our ingenuity. We just could not believe that 12-year-old boys could be this clever. We knew we had outfoxed nature, and we knew that we were going to have warm toes and warm fingers as we put on our skates. We had become gentlemen farmers. The chimney did not fail in sections. Instead, it collapsed all at once. And thick, acrid pine smoke filled our mouths and our eyes as we spilled out of the bathhouse and fell in the snow in 12-year-old disbelief. Absolute astonishment. What had we missed? What had gone wrong? What had Ronnie done wrong? The fire quickly burned itself out and the smoke dissipated. And we dejectedly agreed that this was not a good day for pond hockey. And we made our way home. And when I got home, I felt a tremendous burden. I knew what I had to do. I took down my journal and I wrote 2 words in it. And I wrote these words for not only my future self, but for future generations of boys who would be reading the revised appendix to the Boy Scout handbook. And as I wrote those 2 words, I thought, do the editors of the Boy Scout handbook even know this hard-won knowledge? Do the editors of Salada Teabag tags know this? Did my father have enough life experience to know what I now know? With a heavy heart, I had written, "Caulk melts." Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pat. And that was our last storyteller for tonight. I just have one request for all of you. Please send us your stories. And if you have a program, it says here the date for our next event, which is going to be June 13th. The theme is mixed messages, as I said before. The way this works is we get people email or send in or speak in their story ideas, a quick summary of the story, what it's about and what happens in the story. We really want to hear what happens in the story that you want to tell. And then we make a selection of 5 or 6 storytellers and invite everyone to come for a rehearsal. And so we hear the stories, give each other some feedback, and that's it. Then that's how you prepare the story that you then tell here. But we actually don't always get that many story submissions. So we're often scrambling for stories. So please, we really need story submissions. And even if you have sent in stories before and you didn't get picked, please try again. Because sometimes we get like 8 story submissions and we have to tell 2 people that we're sorry, we can't pick your stories. And it depends on so many things, because we want to have a good mix of stories, like a combination of funny stories and maybe more vulnerable personal stories. Or, I mean, if we didn't pick your story, that doesn't mean we don't want you to try again. So please, send us your stories. And don't be shy, you don't have to be an experienced storyteller. Even introverts often are great storytellers once you get over your shyness and you stand up here. Sometimes those are the best stories. So please, we really look forward to hearing your stories, and we look forward to seeing you again, hopefully in June. Thank you so much.